Hi, welcome to One Pose. I'm Tracy with Yoga Sanctuary. We're going to look at one pose today, upward bow, urdhva dhanurasana. And this is a deep back bend, but it's actually much more accessible than you might think. And I'm going to show you a way to do it with props. So I have a yoga bolster, a blanket, and 2 blocks. If you're at home and you just want to have a bunch of bed pillows, some folded blankets, we're just going to make something about this shape after we get our body a little bit warmed up. So we can have those props there to help us, and then you can decide if you're familiar with upward bow, which is like a gymnastics bridge, and it seems a little scary. You don't even have to lift up off of the props at all, and you'll still get a lot of the energetic benefits. So sometimes we avoid these harder poses, these more advanced poses, and then we miss out on some of those energetic benefits. So I'm trying to just make it so that you could try it out if you want to. So I'm assuming that this is not the first thing you're doing in the morning, so please make sure your body is a little bit warmed up. We'll do a little bit of exact preparation, but again, please be a little bit warmed up. So we'll start down on our belly. So if you come all the way down onto your belly, stretch the legs out long, make sure that it feels as though the front of the hip is nice and open. Bring the hands back by the chest, and then inhale, lift into low cobra. So as you're here in low cobra, just notice as you push into the tops of the feet, make sure that the heels aren't coming together, but that you're keeping the legs parallel. So the front of the leg stays towards the ground. That's important when we come into that upward bow position too. As you're pushing gently into the ground, draw the chest forward and the shoulder blades come together, and then let your head come with you. So when we're in this belly back bend, we have to do all this work against gravity. And when we take our upward bow position, gravity is actually helping us to come to the back bend. But this is a great way for us to warm up the body. Notice the breath filling from the toes to the head. One more inhale. And then as you're exhaling, lower your forehead to the ground and let your hands come down by your sides, palms face up, and let your legs relax. And if that doesn't feel good to you, you could always put one cheek on the ground instead. But just take a moment to relax the back of the body, maybe even wiggle around a little bit. And what we want to notice here is that the low back, as we're moving into a little bit of back bend, the low back stays long. So we'll come back up into low cobra on your inhale. And then as you slide into Sphinx pose, bring the elbows underneath your shoulders and think about pulling the chest forward at the same time that you're pulling your tailbone back. So I'm going to relax my body for a moment. You'll notice that my low back can fold there. I don't want that to happen right now. I want to keep a really long low back so that I'm stretching through the front of the body but keeping everything really protected there. So as we inhale in Sphinx pose, you could just stay here and hold, or you could move dynamically with me as you exhale. Look at your belly button and maybe even lift your hips up off the ground a little to engage the core. And then inhale, return to Sphinx, squeeze the shoulder blades together and draw the chest forward. And we're going to do that a couple of times, exhaling. The knees will bend slightly as you push into the knees and lift the hips. And then make sure that as you inhale back into Sphinx, you straighten through the legs, pull the kneecaps up towards the hips again. Exhaling, rounding through the upper back to feel the core engage. And then inhaling, drawing the chest open, push through the back of the head. We have one more breath here. You could stay still in that Sphinx, or you could move with me. And then on your next exhale, slowly lower down again and let everything relax. Again, forehead or the other cheek to the ground. As you let the palms face upward, what that does is rolls the shoulders inward, so it just gives everything a chance to do the opposite of what it was doing. We'll take one more breath. And then bringing your hands up by your chest, push up into your tabletop position. Tuck your toes, and with your toes tucked, push into the feet so that you feel really active there. And again, notice if the heels were coming towards one another, this would be external rotation. I want to feel what that's like to keep the heels separate but still engaged, like they're drawing together but not actually turning. And then as you exhale this next time, lift your hips up towards a crouching dog so that the thighs and the belly come together. And when you inhale, lower the knees back down and bring the chest forward as much as it's right for you. So think of that kind of like a strong cow position. Exhale, the belly pulls in, you lift the hips up and back. And then as you're inhaling, we're coming forward, opening the chest. And maybe even gazing forward. We're going to do that one more time. Exhaling, lifting, and then as you're inhaling, lowering the knees down and coming into that strong cow. And then exhale, put the tops of the feet on the ground. You could come down to your forearms and just rest that way, or if it feels okay to fold the whole body up into child's pose, you could come into that child's pose position. So often when we're taking back bending, it's just as important to counterbalance, so we want to make sure that we have some time with the spine
kind of long and resting, that the back of the body gets a chance to open up after that work. I'm taking one more breath here. Good, and then we'll bring ourselves back up to tabletop position. We're gonna just do a little bit to warm up the shoulders, stepping the feet forward towards your forward fold. Inhale, take a half lift and lengthen. Exhale, fold downward, and then slide your hands up to the back of the pelvis. Let your elbows come towards one another. Give your head a really gentle shake no, just to release through the tops of the shoulders. On your inhale, bend your knees and come into a spine parallel to the ground, like a chair pose kind of. And then as you're exhaling, tip down and let the head hang over as you keep the elbows coming towards one another. Inhaling, we're coming into this kind of half lift. It'll feel a little like your low cobra did. And then as you're exhaling, folding down and releasing over. And then one more time, inhaling. And as you exhale, fold down. And now this time you could choose, keep your hands just like that, maybe even grab onto your pants there. We're just making some space in the upper back. Or you could interlace your hands if that works for you, and then lift your fist up off of your back. And just know that if your fist can't lift up, that's fine to keep the hands down here. What we want is just to have a moment of opening the chest, allowing the shoulders to have a little bit of range of motion. So we're taking one more breath here. And then as you're exhaling, bring your hands back down into the ground and return to your tabletop position. So I'm going to show you how we would set this up now for upward bow. I'm going to take the two blocks so that I can put my hands out on the blocks. And I'm going to take a blanket or a pillow and fold it up so that it gives me about the same height as what my bolster is going to be. I'm going to put that between the blocks. And then my bolster will come right here. So what I'm doing is making a space for my head, for my shoulders, and my hips. And if my hips are off of this bolster, that's okay. But I definitely want my shoulders on here. And then I'll reach up and try to grab onto the blocks with the hands. Now the blocks work for some people and don't work for others. So as you kind of lie down into this position, you'll have to experiment a little bit. You might need things to be a little taller. I could have more energy come up into my head and my throat by making this blanket smaller, but just really notice what your body needs. If I was in a full urdhva dhanurasana, my throat would be completely open, so that's part of how that big energetic effect happens. But you don't need to go to that extreme if it doesn't feel right to you. So because I have all this height under my body, sometimes the blocks are really helpful to be able to reach the ground. You could also find, so I'm going to fold my hands back this way, elbows are reaching up to the ceiling. If that feels just really strange with the blocks, you could move the blocks out of the way and put your hands on the ground. So I want my knees and my elbows to come up towards the ceiling, and I'd like to take another 2 breaths just here. So my hips are supported. They might be a little off the bolster, but my shoulders are fully supported. My head is supported. But I have the benefits of opening these really important areas where lymph is stored in my armpits and in my hips by letting the front of the body relax open. It could stay just like this. If you want to experiment a little bit with lifting up, then bring the feet nice and tight, close to your sits bones. And then as you exhale, lift your hips. So push into your feet and just lift your hips. Now this would be a good place to stay too. I still want my elbows to come up to the ceiling. My knees are not opening outward. I'm really supported here. I'm pushing a little bit into my head in the blanket. I could come higher where I'm going to now push into my hands. So I'll have to rock my weight to my hands a little bit so that I can lift up onto my head. And I could bring my head all the way back towards the bolster for a little more height, or I could even lift up and press through the hips and then take that full position of urdhva dhanurasana, upward bow. When I come down, I want to reverse. I put my head down, I put my shoulders down. Maybe I pause and bridge for a moment before I put my hips down. And then you could choose to stay here and relax with the arms just out to the side, lower than the shoulders. If your low back is happy with it, you could straighten the legs out. I wouldn't stay here for a long time because of the pressure on the knee joint, but it might feel really nice just to pause for a moment and be there. And then when you feel all done, it's a great idea to take a side position. So you're going to lie on your side, just inch back by your stack of pillows and just take a rest here. And this is just giving your back a chance to respond to that big back bend. You take a couple of breaths on the one side, letting everything kind of settle back down. This is an exciter for the nervous system. So you might notice your heart rate increases, your breath increases.
And then just turn around so that the opposite hip's on the ground, and then just lie down and take a rest on the other side. And as you're taking a couple of breaths in that resting position, just noticing if there's any change that's happening to your body at all. And it might be things that are really pleasant. It might also be things that aren't so pleasant, but please really be honest and notice what this pose does for you so that you can know maybe on those days where you're needing a little boost, a little energy boost, something like this, a quick pose, can really make a big difference in your day. Thanks for joining me.